The Unconventional Therapist's Guide to Nothing.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Unconventional Therapist's Guide to Nothing. My name is Dave, and I am joined here with Greg, the Almighty.
Oh, that's really nice of you. Boy, this is your time of year. That's why you're being so kind and generous with your words, Dave, I think.
It is. It is the only reason.
It's, is it palpable? Do you feel it? I know a
Yeah.
guy like you, this is what are we, a few days from Halloween? We decided we'll take a couple weeks and kind of don't be so hard on ourselves and just have some fun with this Halloween season. What do you think? Like, what's going on in your mind right now?
Thinking about how bad I'm going to dog you as soon as it turns November, though, in the intro.
Okay.
It's going to be awesome.
Actually, you know what? This 3-month stretch is it for me. I love this.
You quit
October,
after
November.
this? You're
What's
quitting. You're quitting the show after this?
Hell
3
no.
months stretch.
Never quitting the show.
You just said it's it for you.
No. I mean, it's it for me. It's the bee's knees. It's like everything. I love this time of year. And it culminates, Dave, with our one hangout a year.
And I also know the reason why you love this time of the year so much.
Why is that?
Because as soon as it got a little bit chilly outside, your freaking cardigans came right out the closet
Oh, boy.
and they hopped on you.
I just blew on those, dust off those cardigans, and it's like home sweet home.
Oh, wow. Cardigans, how I missed you.
So you know what? That's funny that you say that because you're making me think of uniforms. And there's something that when I think of uniforms, I kind of think of heroes for a lot of reasons.
I could be your hero, baby. Like that.
Yeah, no, I like that. Dave, have you ever thought of this concept? And maybe we've talked about it before, and it applies to what we're talking about tonight. Heroes and villains have almost identical origin stories. Like, people are put in these like challenging ordeals, traumatic situations, and some people say, like, no matter what happens, no matter what horrible things, no matter the chaos, I'm going to do good. I'm going to do something, and I'm going to rise above. And other people just go the complete opposite direction. And those are the people we're going to shine a light on today.
Yeah. So last year, for those of you who have been listening for a little bit, we did an episode about, what was it called? Mental health representations in Universal monsters. And we talked about the classic Universal monster movies and each character, and they all represented something very mental health based, right?
Sure.
So now this year, we're going to take a modern twist to this, and we're going to look at some of my favorite slashers, my favorite horror villains, characters, friends. And we're going to try to identify some mental health themes in those characters. And it was a little bit more challenging because some of it's very loose interpretation. And unfortunately, I just know way too much about these characters, and there was so many different avenues I could have gone.
Well, I'm specifically relying on that and excited for that because I'm coming in basically hot here. I'm going to
like
just
mad.
Well, like where like you're gonna name a character and I'm gonna think about them a little bit with my limited knowledge and see what I could come up with too.
Okay.
On the fly.
So essentially what Greg's telling all of us is he did zero work for this episode. So that's great.
Dave, you read me like a book.
So I am going to start this episode off with my all-time favorite character. If anyone knows me, they know that this is my go-to guy, Mr. Freddy Krueger.
Yeah. Dave, did you know?
Oh my God, this is already a horrible episode. Yeah.
No, I was gonna say it's funny that he's
think
your
of something.
favorite.
Think of something, Greg.
Did you ever hear of the urban legend around where you're from, Freddy Fingernails?
Yeah, Freddy Fingernails. Yeah.
I mean, that's pretty closely. We all know where Wes Craven got his idea for this, and if you're interested in that, go to the Sunds episode, SUNDS. But yeah, no, this is. I have to admit, I've always been intrigued by Freddy too, and I love an origin. I love when they give you the origin, and in what movie would you actually figure out?
Dude, the
when this
worst
happened.
one The
Really, you do? You get the origin, right?
absolute worst one is when you get like most direct origin story, and that's the remake, which doesn't have Robert Englund in it. So Freddy Krueger is from, well, he first appears in 1984's Nightmare on Elm Street, and he's played by Robert Englund, who, in my opinion, is the only Freddy Krueger. And they did try a new actor as Freddy Krueger for a remake, and that one flopped really poorly. That was Jackie Earl Haley, I think, from
Yeah. Jackie Earl
Watchmen.
Haley. That's true.
Yep.
Now, what do you
He's a
think
pedophile.
about
In that one? Essentially, that's the origin story. He's a pedophile. Parents burned him. He's toast.
Well, what about this new? Is there any truth to this? What is it? Rob Zombie's coming up with a new kind of Fred show, which is kind of. Have you heard anything about this?
No.
Oh, really? Rob Zombie is doing like a Freddy sort of episodic show.
I don't know that it's about Freddy Krueger.
It's Fred.
Yeah,
Freddy Krueger.
Well, it's not Robert Englund because he already said he's.
No,
too
it's
old.
not.
He's
But
too old.
I'm 100% serious. Yeah, no, this is something. I'm surprised that you haven't heard of it.
I might know what you're talking about, but I feel like I don't know what you're talking
Well,
about.
let me say like what I know you're going to say something different. So can I say what my take on Freddy is? What his disorder could be?
Okay.
It brings up a couple things here, right? Obviously, you might mention something about dreams, but I think more than anything, there's a schizophrenia thing here because, what is a dream besides unreality? So he's living in this unreality. And if he can get other people to participate in his delusion, then that becomes very dangerous for those people. And his own delusions in the real world can be very dangerous to him. Like, don't they have to get him into the real world in order to kill him?
That's the premise of Freddy versus Jason.
Okay, so look, that kind of makes sense, right? Like, he's not living in reality. And if you're not living in reality in our minds, I guess that's a state of psychosis. So maybe Freddy is just psychotic.
Yeah. Okay.
That's
I can see that
Okay.
direction there. So the thing with Freddy is, well, he specifically attacks teenagers. And the thing with teenagers that we know is teenagers are filled with fears and anxieties, right? And Freddy exists only in fear and anxiety. So Freddy is, in some ways, representative of intrusive thoughts, insecurities, fears, and ultimately avoidance. Because the way that the teenagers try to survive is by not sleeping. So they avoid sleep so they can, not have a nightmare and see Freddy. When they're in their dreams, it's what happens often is the dream will start off in some kind of blissful way. It's like something that they love, or it's a hobby of theirs, or it's like a sexual like experience with someone they have an interest in.
Okay, I'm listening.
And then it's a facade, right? And then eventually Freddy will appear because something will like start to feel wrong, and then suddenly Freddy appears. And it's like that thing where you like have this like confidence or this like arrogance about this thing, but then there's this like little crack, and Freddy knows where that crack is. And that's that insecurity, right? Yeah. And that's when he starts to really like chip away at you. And ultimately that's what kills all the teenagers is their fears. He ends up culminating their fear, and he becomes that fear, and then he kills them in their dreams. The only way they can survive is to not be afraid of him. So when they're able to be in their dream and stand confident and say, I'm not afraid of you, he loses his power. Which ultimately in that Freddy versus Jason movie you're referring to, he keeps saying it. He's like, I need more fear. I need more power. He's trying to, because the kids weren't afraid of him anymore because they didn't know about it.
What's super interesting about that is it's scary. It's really scary when you think of, so he's in your dreams. So he has access to your subconscious mind.
Yes.
And if he's got access to your subconscious, like he knows more than anybody, maybe even more than yourself,
right.
like what really are the
Yeah.
things that scare you.
And that's honestly, that's why he's my favorite character. The idea that he appears in your most vulnerable state, that thing where you connect going to sleep and dreaming with comfortability, safety, and then there's even in that safety, you're not safe, right?
And it's like even those things, right? Like you were talking about in the beginning, like something kind of blissful in the beginning, like those things that we love most, like our families and like our ideals and all these things. It's like doing something wrong or nasty to that is essentially what intrusive thoughts do. They kind of like violate our values.
Yeah.
They attack the things that are most important to us, like our families and everything. And that scares us more than anything.
Right. Some of my favorite scenes are like such good highlights of this. Like there's this one scene in Nightmare on Elm Street Part 5 where there's this one character. He's like this California character, like kind of flighty, but he loves comics. And he ends up in like a comic book in his dream, and he's like the superhero, and everything's going well. He's got a machine gun, I think, and he's like, killing all the bad guys. And then suddenly Super Freddy appears. And, he thinks he's got him. And then, Freddy kind of ends up slashing him. And then he's literally like a cartoon comic book character. And then Freddy like starts to slash him with his glove like he's a piece of paper. And
this is like, oh, wow. Oh, yeah. So that's what Freddy is. Yeah, that's kind of reminding me like where you almost create the way you're going to die. It's like it's like a really kind of mess up, almost like Wishmaster, right?
Yeah.
Where you kind of wish for something and it's like a violation of expectations. It's like a violation of that thing that, if you wish for, like, remember when we talked about Faust, it was like this guy wished to never have to shave again. And so like his face started melting off.
But like, they don't really make wishes. It's just like, just taps into things that are like pertinent to that person. Another example, like a thing that comes up pretty often in a lot of the movies is like a parent will be somewhat involved. Like, so there's this one character also in Part 5 where her mom's always like telling her to watch her weight and stuff like that, and she's supposed to be like really pretty and
and she shoves food in her mouth and
then he goes bon appetit, and then they like starts shoving in her cheeks get really big until she explodes.
Yeah, no, I remember that one. And what's funny is it's another thing that's interesting about this is, say you are having a lot of intrusive thoughts and it's really hard to kind of push them away, this isn't that kind of episode. We're not going to get into like that. We don't really recommend you doing that at all. It's kind of fruitless. But if you're struggling like with anxiety and everything like that, like what's the worst thing you can do? Probably attempt to stay awake for long periods of time.
Yeah.
Right. You know what I mean? Like what's going to make you more anxious than sleep deprivation?
And that's the thing. It's, what these kids do is they try to avoid falling asleep. So they stay awake for long periods of time. And what do we know about avoidance? The issue doesn't go away. It just gets worse. And what happens is, I feel like because they've been staying awake for so long, now they're even more vulnerable because they're not strong enough, right?
Yeah.
Because they'll doze off and then they don't even realize they've dozed off. And that makes them even more vulnerable because they don't even realize they're in dream state. This show is sponsored by BetterHelp.
Wow, that's a professional right there. Dave, this month for BetterHelp, it's all about gratitude. And I'm curious, is there anyone you're specifically thankful for this month besides me?
Nope, just you and Michael J. Fox.
Okay, good.
It can be really hard to remember to take a moment to be grateful, but it's incredibly important. We're so used to seeing what's wrong with the world, and gratitude helps us see what is right.
It's very optimistic of you, Dave. But you're right, of course. In our brains, the negative screams and the positive just whispers. So it's helpful to give optimism a little bit of a voice.
I think that was a direct quote from Moses right there, actually. Right?
One of our favorites.
It sounds like it. With BetterHelp therapists, we can be reminded to live life based on preference instead of fear and negativity. BetterHelp is giving us a better approach to life.
Yeah, and we don't have to tell all of you that we're huge fans of therapy. And BetterHelp is a great way to bring it to more people. So if you're ever thinking about starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try.
Yeah, that sounds like a fantastic idea.
Mm.
It's entirely online and convenient. Just fill out a brief questionnaire and get matched with a therapist. And remember, if it's not a good fit, you're going to get a switch for free.
Such a great option, you know?
It really is.
So Dave, visit betterhelp.com/nothing today to get this 10% off your first month.
Bada bing, bada boom. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/nothing. And that's it.
And that's it.
Peace. No.
Well, yeah, no, also sleep paralysis is kind of a thing here, kind of, right?
Definitely daydreaming, ADHD.
Daydreaming.
Yeah, dissociation. Yeah, it is. I mean, there's a lot. And then, like you said, with Freddy, like I was thinking more of like the themes in the movie versus like Freddy himself. He's just a really spiteful, vengeful guy. But like, so if you ever watch the movies, part 1, he's very serious. And then progressively he gets a little bit more sillier and sillier as the sequels go along till we get about part 4 and 5. He almost turns into like a walking punchline. And a lot of people don't. Yeah, he does like the one-liners throughout the movies and stuff like that. But if you watch like 1 through 3, there's significantly less of that. Also, side note, part 3 is probably one of my all-time favorites. And it's called Dream Warriors. And it takes place in like a psychiatric hospital. And it's a great setting for it. And all the kids have like their dream warrior is like their the version of themselves in their dream where they're like warriors.
David, and then the one last maybe kind of interesting thing here, because this is a mental health podcast after all, is what a great sort of nod to paradoxical intention or like insomnia, like CBT insomnia. It's like, all right, if you're really having a hard time with insomnia, attempt to stay awake all night, right? And then you will probably, that's a good way to fall asleep, right?
And then you'll die.
So, all right.
And then you'll die.
And then you'll die because you don't want to go to sleep and meet the sleep. And all cultures have one of these like sleep demons. We've talked about them in the past. It's kind of a scary thing. Old hag. There's like so many different variations of this same kind of monster. Because you're right. Like we are super vulnerable when we go to sleep. Like that's our most vulnerable point.
Yeah.
When we close our eyes and drift off into a dream, we've lost all control. We're literally paralyzed in our sleep.
Yeah.
So, I mean, anything
it makes us susceptible to so much.
Yeah. Interesting.
Like home invasion.
Yeah.
It's terrifying.
And people drawing mustaches on you and writing things on your head.
Amongst other things. Yes.
Shaving your eyebrows. This is kind of things that could happen. Halloween pranks. I don't love it.
All right. So that was Freddy Krueger. And our next one is actually going to be a two-parter. So we're going to look at the Friday the 13th movies. Friday the 13th first came out in 1980. There's been a number of installments of Friday the 13th, plus a TV show that has nothing to do with Jason Voorhees at all. But the two characters we're going to look at are Jason Voorhees and Pamela Voorhees, his mother. So, spoiler alert, in part 1, Friday the 13th, Pamela Voorhees is the killer. It is not Jason. Jason makes a quick little cameo at the very end, pops out of the lake, and pulls our final girl down into the lake. But other than that, he's not even in the movie. He is in the next movies, but he actually doesn't even get his hockey mask until part 3.
That is insane.
In part 2, he wears a burlap sack throughout the movie. Yeah. It's a little
significantly less scary.
Also, here's a little other trivia for you. He's not even in part 5. It is a fake Jason. It is actually like some, I forget, maintenance guy of the camp. Or no, that's not what he is. But his name's really Roy. He takes off his mask and he's wearing like a little fake.
Now,
head.
Dave, I gotta ask you, as a horror connoisseur, I've recently watched the movie Scream. I love Scream, and you mentioning Pamela Voorhees as the real killer, it reminded me of that, obviously, because there's that he kind of asked that question on the phone, right?
Yeah.
Now, a lot of people say that Scream, it kind of saved horror because it took us away from, like, Jason 5 and Freddy 4, 5, and Jason 7, 8, 9, right? So, like, where do you stand as far as like enjoying these like deep sequels, or do you think they kind of take away from the original movies?
I love them.
Okay.
I love them.
I think that's cool, and I believe that you do.
I absolutely love them.
Yeah.
And you know what? There's for most of these franchises, there's probably like later installments that I like even better than the originals.
Even
Actually,
Halloween,
no,
Season of the Witch.
Season of the Witch is part 3. That's awesome.
Oh,
Halloween 2 is kind of faster paced than Halloween 1. So kind of a more enjoyable movie at
Wow.
times.
all right. All right, well, let's
Actually,
go back to
Friday the
Jason.
13th, part 1 is kind of boring.
Kevin Bacon, though.
Hot take.
Kevin Bacon.
Yeah,
it is kind
Kevin
of boring.
Bacon. It is. All right. So our first character we'll talk about. Actually, let's talk about Pamela Voorhees first, I think. So she's the killer in part 1. She comes out as like kind of delusional, right? Hearing voices, talking to herself, saying like, mommy could have saved you, and if only they paid attention, and she's saying all these crazy things. But she's obviously there's like themes of grief here, right?
Yeah. Well, beyond that, I think.
Beyond grief, right? So what do you think, Greg?
Well, I mean, obviously, there may have been. I don't know, because grief isn't going to send you into a state of psychosis unless you kind of have unless you're treating it in funny ways, or if you have predisposition for dormant schizophrenia or a bipolar or something like that. Because I don't know if you're going to go, but although losing a child is such a intense trauma.
And let's not just say it's not just any child. And I say this because obviously everyone's children are special to them. But I do think there's a little something different when it's a child with special needs. Sure. And Jason had special needs. And it's because of the amount of like intensive care that you have to provide that individual. And then
one of his special needs, he lives to murder teenagers.
He just had a weird shaped head, actually. That was his special need.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I mean, I feel like she was very invested in him. Not invested enough that she was watching him instead of cooking up burgers in the camp when he was thrown into the lake.
Right. And I suppose there's like an element of when you have like maybe like a special needs child who's going to need you forever. So it's like you're kind of you've committed yourself to a lifetime with this person. It's not like when they turn 18, they're going to like head off into the sunset, right? You know what I mean? Like kids don't really do that anymore. But
I also think she's a single mom. I could be wrong about that, but I don't think we talk about Daddy Jason ever.
Well, a lot of red flags. Daddy Jason was like, I think I'm getting out of here.
This might not be for me.
Yeah. This whole situation isn't for me.
Have you seen his head?
That's terrible.
There's 3 hairs coming out of it.
Yeah. Hey, listen. Let's not go there.
3 tufts of hair. Sorry.
You gotta shave the tufts.
You don't have 3 hairs. You have 0.
That's right.
That's much better.
You're right.
So yeah, so grief, but obviously to like the utmost degree, probably like you said, maybe some, what did you say, psychosis, stress-induced grief. Is it grief-induced psychosis? Could that be a thing?
I mean, I'm sure anything can be a thing.
Would you just mark this down as adjustment disorder? And then
Probably not.
Track it for 6 months and see how that goes.
Probably, exceed adjustment disorder.
Adjustment disorder is like the diagnosis I think that we give when we don't know really what's going on.
Yeah.
And it's because it's like a temporary 6-month diagnosis that, you're supposed to kind of like monitor and see how it goes. But often given with grief, right? Like if somebody's grief seems a little bit like above and beyond what I hate to say typical, but like a common grief might look like. Obviously, like adjustment disorder fits because you can kind of see like, is it just really bad grief, or is it maybe you're trying to murder camp counselors?
Yeah. We'll see in 6 months.
See in 6 months. I think we found out it was more than just
Yeah, we did.
grief. All right, so then going on to Jason, the star of the show in many ways.
Do you know who he reminds me of kind of in a way? You know, he's got to be definitely sort of parts of this are pulling directly from Frankenstein because it's like he doesn't know. Like Frankenstein kills a kid. Like no one really mentions that too much. But he didn't know.
We did when we talked about Frankenstein. We did.
Yeah. It's like, you know, but Frankenstein didn't do that on purpose. He didn't know you're not supposed to throw people in the water and they'll drown. So maybe Jason didn't know you're not supposed to hack up teenagers because maybe his mom was like really into the Bible or something, and those kids doing things like drinking and having sex and stuff like that is like a violation of his values, and
It's
he's like
naughty.
they need to be punished.
Yeah, that's naughty.
It's naughty. Yeah, it's naughty.
So, couple of things here. Obviously, well, big theme here is neglect, right?
Mhm.
So what happens is Jason can't swim, goes into the lake. The camp counselors were too busy smoking pot and having sex to notice that Jason was drowning.
Mhm.
Neglect, right? But you're right. That was actually one of the things I had written down in my notes. Like there's something about that acting poorly, like drinking, sex, smoking pot, all that stuff, bad behavior. Those are the ones that end up becoming, you know, pieces of meat to Jason. And
It's like it's a tale as old as time, right? We've been like society's been feeding us that forever. Like you do this kind of stuff,
Yeah.
you're gonna die.
It's so funny because it's like there's murder involved, but we're holding these camp counselors to this higher standard that like
I know.
he's like what would you say? He's like coming in as like the this like judge character, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
either you pass or you fail based on your behavior. And
You
so
know what's scary about Jason too is, you know, sometimes he'll do that thing where he stops and just kind of looks at you, and because he's wearing a mask, you have no idea where you stand with him. That's something that's really scary. Like
and
when
the fact that one eye goes one way and the other eye goes the other way.
yeah. Yeah.
You really don't know.
You're like, what is this guy doing? Chameleon.
Yeah. So it's it's funny though because like I didn't think about it, but you said it. It's like he has values. Jason
Yeah.
has values. Murder does not
No,
fit
murder's
those
fine.
values, but he doesn't agree with.
But
like,
that's no different than like the people burning witches at the stake.
right.
You know, same kind of thing.
Yeah. So what is it saying though? It's not about Jason. He's just a catalyst for this. It's saying it's more about the teens and like what is it saying about teens? What is the message here?
I think the message, and you know what's funny is because like you might think that like a Puritan wrote this movie, but it can't be that way. It's
No. You want to know who made this movie?
who?
Sean S. Cunningham, who actually made like softcore porn films. So that's really ironic that like
Yeah.
we say that, but yeah, no, I actually just met him last month. There's a lot of like people that are upset with the whole franchise because it was this big court thing and like with the rights of the movie. So the Friday the 13th haven't been able to be made in like a long time because of that. But it recently got cleared up. So we're probably going to start to see a ton of stuff Friday the 13th pop up soon, which I don't know if that's great, but we'll see.
Okay. And so you're thinking like, what is he trying to do? Like, is there even a message, or are we kind of thinking too much into that?
Like, why do teens have to be so like on the straight and narrow, right? Like, why?
Teen pregnancy, kids having kids.
Because babies having babies. So
You know?
I guess. So there's some kind of message there. But then this other thing struck me.
Okay.
And this kind of dawned on me like almost like right before we were about to record. He's controlled by his mom.
Mhm.
So and you find this out because there's even a scene where one of the final girls like puts on his mom's sweater because he has a little shrine for his mom.
Yeah.
And she puts on the sweater and starts talking like, Jason, mommy's talking to you. And then he like goes into a daze and he sees his mom and he starts to listen. So he's like a product of this like psychological control.
Yeah.
And then I was thinking of like that emotional incest. And I brought that term up. I was trying to remember what that term was before.
Sounds dirty.
Got on. It sounds really dirty, but it's like that control that a parent has over you, right? And then so it's like it's kind of strange though, because it's like obviously we're talking about an individual with disabilities. So we're almost talking about like that vulnerability they have to be controlled.
Yeah.
By a parent, and that's not great. And then the parent could easily get them to do things that aren't great. And is actually like I'm going to talk about this theme again in another character later. But that was something.
But what happens? So the real villain is obviously the mom. But what happens when the mom's gone? And who's dictating Jason's behavior then?
So he's still hearing the mom, though.
Yeah,
is what we kind of think.
Almost like a Norman Bates kind of thing.
Yeah, kind of like that.
Okay.
I mean, as we go along, obviously we kind of separate from that a little bit. So I don't think that's the driving force forever. There's also this weird thing that nobody knows if he's a zombie or a ghost.
Yeah, doesn't seem like a ghost. Ghosts are different.
Ghosts are different. There's like this paranormal. There's this paranormal thing with him as well. So he's resurrected in one, and then others he's like Jason Goes to Hell. He's like a spirit that gets inside of other people.
Is he resurrected with lightning?
The one with Corey.
Well, Frankenstein.
Like
there you go. Even though that doesn't happen in the movie. I mean, in the book.
Because they freaking try to dig him up, and then as they dig him up, they like put a spear through him, and then lightning hits it.
Perfect.
Like, well, you guys dug him up. Come on, that's on you now.
I bet you it was teenagers.
It was Tommy Jarvis
on a dare.
It wasn't teens.
Well, what do we got next?
All right, so this will bring us to a classic here. We got Michael Myers from 1978's Halloween by John Carpenter, the legend John Carpenter.
I listened a while back. They did a podcast series on just the making of this movie, and it was fantastic.
I listened to that too. That was great. Yep. I mean, this movie is really important within the realm of horror and like what came out of it. Like Jason, Freddy, and all them, they don't exist without Halloween, I think.
Mm-hmm.
So there's two different variations of Halloweens. And Greg, I think you're probably more familiar with the second, which is like the Rob Zombie Halloweens.
Well, I mean,
accurate?
I mean, I am familiar with them and I like them kind of, but I actually am very familiar with the original Halloween. Because like you said, it's almost like that thing where people could be like, you like Freddy better, right? I mean, tons of people I'm sure like Jason better. And they're like, well, maybe the first Halloween, there's no blood. There's no, like, it's not that scary and all these things. But it's like, that's like saying like, they don't think the Beatles are superior to certain bands just because they're not really into the Beatles music. It's like these bands don't exist without the Beatles. These movies don't exist without Michael Myers and John Carpenter. Yeah. So it's important.
It is. So the difference between John Carpenter's Halloween and Rob Zombie's Halloween is Rob Zombie attempted to give Michael Myers a backstory, whereas John Carpenter's doesn't. We do have an early scene as a child where he goes into his sister's room and stabs her to death. And then flash forward, he's a inmate in this psych ward. He's seeing Dr. Loomis is his like, what would you call it? He's his psychologist. Personal psychologist. Yeah. And he's sitting there. He's like the worst because he's telling everyone how terrible he is and that there's only evil behind those eyes and he must never be let out. And then he ends up breaking out. So that's the only story. There's a lot of mystery around him in John Carpenter's, which I kind of like. There's no explanation. He's just pure evil.
Yeah, no, I like that too because it makes your imagination do a lot of the work, which can be really scary. But who doesn't really love an origin?
Sure. So Rob Zombie supplied that. And in Rob Zombies, we see a young boy who's bullied, who comes from a home where, I mean, and no knock on this profession, but like his mother is an exotic dancer. She has like a deadbeat, sort of abusive boyfriend that, doesn't really treat him the best. And she has to work nights to make ends meet. So she's not around as much as she would like to. Seems like a nice mom, but just not present enough. And he turns a little antisocial, right? He
Yeah.
starts with killing animals or, being abusive towards animals. And then he ends up pretty viciously attacking his bulliers at some point. And that leads him on his spiral to the point where he kills his sister and her boyfriend and the boyfriend, I think. The mom's
Like,
boyfriend.
if you see a kid hurting a bird or smashing worms or hurting animals, that's a problem.
What if the animal's already dead?
Well, now what
Did
are
I
they
tell you
doing?
about that?
What do they do? David, are you trying
They
to?
like flick it up in the air. No, I had like I have a young kid that I work with, and we went outside to play football like we do, and
Right, yep.
He had like a stick in his hand, and all of a sudden he goes, "Hey, look!" and he like flicks up a dead bird.
Yeah.
I'm like, leave it
So,
alone.
yeah, I mean, I think there's a level of callousness there. I think it's worse if he killed
If it
it.
was a live bird that he
Yeah.
killed, yeah.
I mean, you poke something dead with a stick. I think that's kind of normal.
Yeah, I guess.
The flip, I don't know.
I know the flip was what threw me off.
And like it's flying again, just one last flight.
But yeah,
that's
they do say, what is that? Like that FBI's like serial killer like profile.
Oh yeah,
Some early age behavior is cruelty towards animals, right?
absolutely. That's a
That's a big
telltale
red
sign.
flag.
Head injuries sometimes. So my kid fell off his swing once, and like there he goes. That's it. Now I got to look out for the other things.
No, he's a serial killer. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I mean, essentially, in Rob Zombie's Halloween, that's how they portray Michael Myers. So we see that development. So we see somebody turn into a monster, right?
Mhm.
And I think it's really easy to kind of say like antisocial personality disorder is present for Michael Myers. He has
I
no
think
regard,
the zero empathy.
zero empathy, zero regard for social norms and rules and laws or anything like that. No connections to others.
Except the sister, right? Sort of
He has that attachment to his sister, but then he tries killing her. So
complicated.
that.
So the other thing too, again with the mask, is the affect is gone, and not being able to see that in someone, like the way their face behaves in a certain situation. It's like that's scary. Are you happy right now? Like wait, as your kid, like you know what I mean? You just don't. There's no void of emotion is a scary, scary thing because void of emotion is void of humanity, right?
Yeah.
Like when you're in a terrible situation, you're pleading with someone because you're pleading with their sense of like maybe they'll feel my emotions and feel something for me. And when you see on someone that there's no possibility of that, there's no possibility of empathy, it's like that's a death sentence. You're done.
So what we see, the similarity in both versions, Rob Zombie and John Carpenter's, is like as a full grown adult, Michael Myers is this stoic, careless, brutal killer, right? He has no, like you said, no empathy, no connections to the outside world. He lives by his own rules, his own laws, and he is non-responsive, and he never speaks a word. Never hear him say anything. Catatonia, it's a psychological disorder that is characterized by a state of unresponsiveness while apparently awake and aware. So symptoms include mutism, negativism, and mimicking movements and speech of others, and withdrawal. I think that fits him to a T. And even to the point where like that little head tilt that he does at times, almost like copying others, that he sees. I think it's really interesting to think of that for him.
That catatonia can be a symptom. It's like a negative symptom because it's lacking something. And they see that there's a lot of that with schizophrenic people.
Yeah. Yep.
So yeah, no, I think you pegged this guy. That's
This
for
one
sure.
also begs the question: can someone be born evil?
Are you asking?
I mean, that's the question that's asked in John Carpenter's.
Yeah, is
It's
there?
weird to believe he was born evil. There is only evil
Yeah.
in him because we don't see his backstory. And according to Dr. Loomis, he is just evil. He's pure evil.
So can someone be born evil?
I mean, I've always thought that we all have the capacity for evil, but we
Okay.
also are, have the capacity for good.
So it's all about conditioning, right? On some level.
Yeah, it's like, where do we develop our moral compass, our code of ethics, and all that stuff? Like, where does that come from? A lot of it's instilled in us, right?
So it's the same question as can someone be born good?
Right.
Not really.
It's learned, it's conditioned, it's modeled, it's all those things, right?
But then there is this
we have the
certain
capacity
thing
for
though,
both.
where it
Is what we're
right.
saying, right?
But something makes me think that yes, you can be born good or evil, and here's why. Like when we talked about Viktor Frankl or whoever in a like say anybody in a Holocaust situation, and there's people being, there's little kids being hurt and killed and beaten, and some people know that it's good. You've been conditioned to know that it's good to help them out, pick them up, and save them. But that doesn't mean that everyone's going to do that.
Right.
But some people have the ability to rise above that and rise above whatever they've been like conditioned, right? And just kind of do it anyway, despite that. So it's like more. Some people are born with this thing where they can learn a value and actually follow through with it. Just because you're conditioned to be good or evil doesn't mean that you have the inner strength to do it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So I mean, I don't know what that's called. I don't even know if that makes any sense, to be honest. But it's Halloween, so hey. Can someone be born evil? I do love that question, Dave.
Thank you.
We didn't sufficiently answer it, but
I don't know that there's an answer. That's what these movies are posing. Here, the next one. This is a conversation I was looking forward to.
Okay.
So the next film is, the next character is Pinhead, and he's from 1987's Hellraiser, which is also based on the books written by Clive Barker. I keep forgetting the name of the book that I let you borrow, but that was, I think, his Pinhead's first appearance. And then I was like telling you also, there was all this controversy. They made a recent Hellraiser movie 2 years ago now, I think, it's on Hulu. And Pinhead was cast as a female, and everybody was up in arms because they're like, oh, there's only one, Pinhead's a male, and also the actor that plays Pinhead is Doug Bradley, and everyone thinks he's the best Pinhead. But if you read Clive Barker's book, it very well does read as though Pinhead is a female in the book, because he describes Pinhead having, or the one with the pins coming out of their head, having like this really feminine voice. So yeah. I thought that was interesting. Just a little tidbit of information, nothing to do with anything else. But there is some amazing themes in the book. We'll also see them in the movie, but definitely in the book, it's very present. Hedonism, greed, lust, envy, all those things, but also just like this internal drive for pleasure, to the point where you'll risk everything, you'll throw everything away, you'll put other people at risk to receive the ultimate pleasure. And I think that's it's often met with some kind of negative side, right? Whether it's like,
I mean, if anything, like ultimate pleasure kind of is usually met with shame. I think if you live your life based on pleasure seeking, that's like kind of a terrible way to go about your life. And I think that's ancient human wisdom, and all religions are sort of based around that idea. Because look, if you live your life based on the idea of like, I just want to feel good, that you're putting yourself above everyone else, and you're missing out on all the things that make life interesting, like making other people feel good, right? Like doing what's good in the world.
Yeah, you ever seen like those like movies where like older people will take like younger people's blood to make them look younger? I'm trying to think of like what that's from, but I've seen that theme in a movie. But that's sort of like what happens here. There's this one character who is not a fully formed person. It's like missing skin. He's like
Yeah,
just
yeah. They
ligaments
did
and
like a
stuff.
ritual. I've seen that.
And yeah, she had to bring him other people to kill, and then he has, that's how he gets his strength, and he becomes more and more human-like because of that. But it's that greed. But what got him to that point where he was no longer human was he was doing this pleasure-seeking quest, and these Cenobites come from this other dimension, I guess, which is probably hell. And they guarantee you, like, if you make this agreement with us or this pact with us, you'll feel pleasure like you've never experienced it before. Every one of your senses will be met with the ultimate pleasure.
Mm,
What happens is
titillating.
it's so overstimulating that it's horrible.
Yeah.
And the characters, like, this is like, experiences it as if it's like the worst feeling you could ever imagine if all of your senses are being um
Aroused.
aroused at the same time,
Yeah.
to the extreme. It's like sensory overload.
Mm.
And that's how they, but like, it's like we were talking about Wishmaster. It's kind of like that. It's like
Yeah. No. Exactly. That's
they
what I was
make
thinking. Yeah.
they make these agreements with you, but it's like there's always some kind of like dark side to the agreement.
So,
But that's what happens when you're
seeking
greedy,
pleasure
right?
alone. So pleasure, there's nothing wrong with like pleasure. Like that's not what we're saying here. Because if you live your life in a way that you're kind of, as best you can,
Yeah.
values based, and trying to do something good, trying to, make a dent in the world. I don't know, trying to do, whatever you want to call it. Pleasure is going to ensue you every once in a while, and that's great. But if that's the end game, that's the goal, pleasure, you're just living your life seeking pleasure. Like, what even is that?
So I'm going to be super vague because like there's obviously real persons, like business involved in this. But I have this conversation with an individual that I work with because of his pleasure seeking,
Mm.
he's put his whole life at risk. His family, his relationships, his well-being, all because he started to seek pleasure in experimenting in different things within the relationship, and it took over. It became the focal point of everything, to the point where he no longer felt like he could make choices based on anything but like thinking about getting that pleasure again.
It's a weakness, right?
It really becomes a weakness, a hyper focus, and it got to the point where I don't think he knew the difference anymore of like what kind of decision he was making, whether it was actually just, thinking of that goal to receive the pleasure, or if it was actually in the best interest of his relationship. And there was a lot of self deceit going on. It just got so bad. And yeah, that pleasure is a really dangerous thing.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you. I'm glad we feel the same way on that. That's I'm glad you brought that character up too, because people can't hear that enough. Societally, it's fine to be like, oh, I just want to be, even saying the word happy so much, even seeking like happiness in a way. Like, and I don't want to say that that's wrong. It's not. It's just that you can't seek happiness for happiness' sake.
Yes, and you can't seek it at the cost of others,
Right.
because that's never a good thing, right? Especially when those others are intertwined in your life, it's never going to go in a good direction for you if you do that. And also, like, this is kind of a controversial thing to say, but like some of our, I'll use the word fetish, like
Yeah.
fetishes, because that's like a perfect example of pleasures that people seek. Um, they're probably private for a reason.
Yeah.
And like, and
Yep.
they're probably not meant to be your full lifestyle for a reason. And they feel taboo for a reason. And yeah, if you think that it's gonna be your whole life, then that's gonna get really complicated. I think I'm getting a little bit more like
No,
in
I totally get
murky
what you're
area,
saying. I
but
do. And
yeah.
like simply saying it too, it's just like it's just if you're like I'm seeking pleasure, I'm seeking happiness, it means you're kind of coming from a place where you're always miserable because you're always seeking something better.
Yeah.
Instead of like gratitude, what we talked about a little bit with the BetterHelp ad, and just in the sense of like don't you don't need to the pursuit of happiness. We talked about this before where it's not so much about feeling good, it's about being good and doing good. That's what people
Yeah.
are
Yeah.
like should be doing, because if you're like, I'm going to do good, happiness is going to happen to you.
Right. The last thing I will say too is like, if pleasure becomes your norm, it no longer is going to feel as pleasurable, and you are going to continue to push and push the limit. It's like chasing the dragon, like what
Yeah.
people talk about with drugs and all that stuff. It will eventually just lead to something that is going to be not a good area. So it is best to receive it in small doses
Mhm.
periodically than all the time. And yeah, I think our society today is kind of like addicted
Mhm.
to pleasure. So
Me too.
yeah. All right. The next character, Leatherface from 1974's Texas Chainsaw Massacre. I do love this movie, and it's a weird one.
It is a weird one.
Have you seen it?
I have.
Okay,
And I've seen like the remakes too. I've seen the one with Jessica Biel. I actually kind of like that one.
that's a good one. That's a good one. So one of the obvious things is this movie obviously depicts a person with an intellectual disability. Leatherface
Mm.
is um clearly disabled.
In right.
Yep, impaired. And one of the things I think is important to like think about is the family dynamics. So
Yeah.
he's in this like cannibalistic, violent, abusive family. And my question is he exploited? Like they raise him to be this way. They tell him to go chase down this girl, and like he bonks her on the head with his mallet and drags her into his meat locker. Is he a sympathetic character? Because he's clearly a product of his upbringing, and he's heavily influenced by his family.
Well, if he's sympathetic, then Jason's sympathetic. It's sort of the
Yeah,
same kind of
I agree with
trajectory.
you.
But
Good
the thing
point.
is here, what's going on here is the same thing that goes on in Candyman, where it's like fear of, it's othering for sure, and it's also fear of Appalachia and that kind of poor society, in the same way that like Candyman brings fear to like the projects in urban setting,
Yeah.
right? It's kind of the same idea.
Yeah,
Like,
because I mean, they have like they're basically like the family runs like the local gas station, all everything in town, and they kind of prey on people, outsiders that are coming in, which we see
yeah,
in like so many horror movies. Like they pop into a weird town, and next thing you know, they're lunch meat.
it's like one family that just keeps having kids with itself.
Yeah, well, I mean, this family is obviously there's like some incest going on, I would assume. So that's
Man,
another
incest is
aspect.
nuts.
Incest.
I mean, there's
nuts.
emotional incest, and then there's straight up incest.
Yeah.
Which
I
is,
mean, this is the other one where there's like that emotional incest. Is that what we called it? The parent
well,
one?
yeah, that's the
Yeah,
term.
emotional
But like, there's
incest.
also literal incest.
This one has both.
Yeah.
I would say. He is definitely controlled. And here's the other thing. Leatherface has no identity. So he's controlled by his family. They dictate what he does. They clearly have raised him to be this, ogre that, just kills people, puts them on meat hooks. And he wears masks of other people's faces.
That's interesting.
He has no identity of his own. Think about that.
That is actually a really cool thought, because and then how dangerous is it to not have identity?
Yeah. He doesn't know who he is, so he can't even have his own values, his own moral compass. So he clearly just acts on what he knows, what he's told to do, and what he sees. I mean, they
Maybe
literally
Stephen is
feed
like, this
his
person's life.
grandfather. they feed his grandfather blood. It's like there's a scene. His grandfather's like this crypt keeper looking guy, and they put blood up to his mouth to like resuscitate him a
Oh
little
my
bit.
god.
Yeah, it's
Does that
great.
work?
Yeah, of course.
That's like the end of Grapes of Wrath when there's like this like emaciated dude and like the only way to it's just like this really weird scene where like the only way to help him out is the young woman has to like breastfeed him. It's, it's like what the hell's going on? That's Appalachia, man. I hate to
Okay.
say it. That's
Yeah.
the same place.
Yeah.
I mean, things
So,
get tough over there.
I do think that part of what they're saying here is like it is dangerous to not have an identity. If you don't have an identity, you can do really dangerous things because
Also
there's
dangerous to live in
nothing.
a really kind of underpopulated place.
Yeah. Well, not for them. It's not dangerous.
Well, I don't know. I don't know if they're
on their
thriving.
They're on their pig farm. They're thriving.
Yeah, like it's like old vampire, just a couple
They're in
drops
the
of blood.
They're in the slaughterhouse, dude. They got meat for days.
Oh, they're doing good. Yeah, a lot of pig meat is good. It's good.
Good for them.
Yeah.
All right. So next is Chucky
Okay.
from Child's Play, 1988.
I see your note, and this is a stretch.
No, it's not.
Okay.
Trust me. Body image,
Okay.
body insecurity.
Okay. Well, that's true.
Charles Lee Ray inhabits the good guy doll Chucky, his body, when he's in a shootout at a toy store, and his soul ends up in the Chucky doll, and then Chucky spends his entire life trying to inhabit a real person's body to get out of the doll. He's never satisfied with his doll appearance. He's totally body conscious.
So it's like that's not body dysmorphic disorder though. That's more of you're right. It's like it's he's not happy with the way his body has turned out.
Yeah. He does not like the body, his vessel. He does not like his vessel. And he wants to get into another vessel. A better vessel.
Wow, this is very topical too, right? I mean, this is kind of
How many people would love to get into a different person's body, to be outside of their own body and like get rid of their own body?
Tons, right?
Yeah, a lot. That's the answer.
Yeah, I mean, you'll go on Instagram, and you're like, that dude. I probably could do all right with that bod.
Yeah,
in this brain.
And at some point, what do we have to do in order to get over that? We have to accept. Yeah, we have to have acceptance, right? I have this younger patient, and like, my heart breaks when she talks about it. But like, she will bring up like just this idea that she has about herself because of her body type. And it's like, it's sad, but like there's this level of acceptance that she has. And I'm like, I really, really, really find that admirable and honorable. I'm like that. And she's young too. So that's what makes it most impressive. But it's like, we do have to have that. Like, and it sucks if you don't like your body, but at the same time, you don't really get to choose another one. Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so we're in this society where everybody's just like doing the quick fixes or these hopeful things to like change their body type, and not all of them are healthy, right?
Yeah.
There's
so there's like two things going there. There is a healthy ways to sort of change things like to the best that of your ability, and then at a certain point there's an acceptance, and that's
because you can't change your frame.
No,
like some people have like broad frames, You got swimmer shoulders.
You got big bones.
Got big bones.
You got little bones.
Yeah.
Both.
Bones.
I mean,
brittle bones.
You don't have perfect sized bones, like bone structure like Dave.
So last one, and you're probably really grateful that that's it. So 1992's Candyman.
Yeah.
The character is Candyman. One of my faves. Great.
Yeah. No. Did you know this was honestly, I don't know if you knew this, but this is in a way based on a true story. Now, I know you're going to go back to Clive Barker and say it's taken from one of his short stories. That's true. But did you know that in Cabrini Green, there's something that happened in that housing project that whoever, I forget who the director of this movie was like, oh no, that it kind of like changed the trajectory of the movie. So there's this woman, and they even put the name in the movie, like Ruthie Mae, whatever. And I hope I'm telling you, I hope you're hearing this for the first time. She was schizophrenic. She was having all these, she's the kind of person that, you would see on the street talking to people that weren't there. She had her mental health issues. And she calls 911 and she's like, people are coming in through my bathroom mirror and I need help. Right. And if you watch the preview of Candyman or Bloody Mary or any of these urban legends, it's like, that's what it is. You say the name into the mirror a bunch of times and they come out. And so she calls 911, she says that, and they're kind of like, okay, they know who she is. They don't respond in a proper amount of time. And it becomes this thing where she calls a couple times saying that people are coming in through her bathroom mirror. And they're like, that's a crazy thing to say, right? Well, it turns out that she was telling the truth and people came in through her bathroom mirror, robbed her, and killed her. And the way they were doing that was when they had designed the building, they had left space in between the walls for plumbers to work on the pipes. So people were literally coming in through her bathroom window. So that created this like real urban legend. And it's like a mashup of the things that like fake like folklore
Yeah.
and reality.
That's
Crazy.
pretty wild.
Yeah.
That is wild.
Crazy. And they killed her. And so they had to add that. They had to add that into the movie.
Shout out Ruthie Mae.
Shout out. Wild. So anyways.
So folklore.
Yeah.
Definitely a big thing. Maybe you can talk about this a little bit. Gentrification, othering, scaring people in, scaring people out. So we're talking about the projects, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And you said something that's pretty interesting to me because it was like we talked about this a little bit when we were mentioning who we would want to mention in something like this. And I said Candyman. I love Candyman. And you agreed. And I was like, yeah, like the idea that it's you should fear the projects. And I was like, and I guess that's kind of legitimate. Like, shouldn't we fear the projects in a sense? And you're like, well, I don't know. There's like families living there and like having normal lives there. And it's like, well, yeah, that's absolutely true. Like that you kind of forget that. It's like for the vast majority, people are just having normal lives. And it's such a concentration of people sometimes, especially in Chicago. These are like, 15 stories high sometimes. And it's like, yeah, there's going to be some crime in there because there's a lack of resources, a lack of money. But for the most part, it's a community,
Yeah. I think that's actually like something they do show in this movie is that there are families living in the project. And there is this sense that like it's dangerous, but the families that live there don't have a choice. Right. It's that level of acceptance that you have to have that, hey, there's something dangerous here, but hey, we have no other choice. We don't have anywhere else to live. So that the folklore around Candyman exists for two reasons. Like we said, it's it keeps people out, but also it keeps people in, right?
Yeah.
So it's I don't know, it's an interesting kind of concept. And then gentrification, and that's shown way more in like the newer Candyman that just came out, which I do recommend people check out. It's a really good film in my opinion. But gentrification is like this idea of like trying to push out, like they're building up the areas without regard to the people that already exist there, right? And then they make it so expensive that these people can't afford to live there. And that's very present in the whole Candyman world right there.
And it's a complicated thing though too, because if you are like on the outside looking in, you're like, oh, well, like what's wrong with making the neighborhood nicer?
Yeah.
And it's like, well, you're making the neighborhood impossible to live in for some people.
Right.
And, you know what I mean? It's like you are making it nicer in a sense, but you're also destroying a community. It's like, what's the trade-off here?
Right. and Candyman represents like that justification of why they feel they should eliminate areas like that, right? Because like it's scary. There's bad things that happen there. So if we know that that exists, then why should we feel bad about kind of taking over this community and
Mhm.
pushing that out, right?
'Cause it's
And
like, where do those people go?
right, exactly. But they don't care, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Because they want their you know, giant
So
condo.
what is the alternative? Like, what is the answer though, if it's not gentrification? Like, what is the answer? You know what I mean? Just, opportunity, employment, like giving people a sense of pride and agency. It's not an easy fix.
Not
There's
an
no
easy
easy fix
fix.
to any of these like social issues.
Oh, yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, it's just like a lot of corruption. That's kind of part of this too.
Absolutely. Absolutely. These places exist the way they do for a reason.
Yep.
Why
Like the
don't they
reason
get the
why people were able
resources?
to crawl through the bathroom mirror is because
Yeah.
of building with cheap materials that, you get these great government bonds to build something good and politicians take their little piece and you're
Yeah.
left with trash.
But think about it this way too. If you're like a parent, right? And you live in an area that has a high rate of crime or there's dangerous people out there. And you want your children to kind of stay in line and stay close by.
Yeah.
What better way to do that than to have some kind of story that keeps them close by because they are petrified to stray, right?
Yeah,
And
the big bad wolf.
right. So in a way, Candyman can exist in a setting like a project because it's scary out there. So if he exists, then our kids will hopefully stay close by and not stray.
Mm. And it's worked for millennia. But the
Yeah.
thing is, it's another thing that Candyman does is create this like a black boogeyman, and
Yeah.
that's kind of that happened with Birth of a Nation, right? Remember
Hmm.
that film that was about like the KKK, and it's like, oh, black people are dangerous, and they're after all white women and everything, and that's
Well,
just followed.
that's his origin. Yeah, that's his
Yeah,
origin.
yeah,
Yeah, it's so funny because that was my next point was like on the flip side, he exists within like suburban homes because kids can like talk about the lore of Candyman and like we're gonna say it into the mirror and like maybe this like you said this black boogeyman will appear and that's like it keeps the project scary, right? It
yeah.
keeps that
And keep the
idea that
projects
it's
out of the
dangerous.
suburb. It's almost like 1992. You could think of almost in terms of like bringing rap music into the home.
Right. Yeah.
Like, don't bring it here.
It's
It's
scary.
dangerous.
It's dangerous. It doesn't belong. And yeah, Candyman's story, his origin is he falls in love and has like a relationship with a white woman. And when it's discovered,
Put bees on
they
them.
they put bees on him and they cut off his hand
Yeah,
and they put bees and honey on him. Right?
yeah. What a way to
Delicious,
go.
delicious honey.
Yeah, can't lick it all off in time though.
Yeah,
That's
it's
the.
a deep story though.
I
It
know it's
really
actually
is.
kind of a great story.
Yeah.
Now, watching that origin movie, that'd be cool. Like a period piece.
I mean, they show glimpses of it in one of the films. I can't remember if it's the first one or the second one or the third
It's
one.
not the first one, I don't
It's
think.
not. They don't show clips of it in the first one. One of them, they definitely show clips of him in like that time period.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's
Right.
cool. I
Yeah.
love when they do that.
Yeah. So
Maybe that'd be Farewell to the Flesh, maybe.
that was part two, I think.
Hmm. And then what's
I
the third
also
one?
love there's the Mardi Gras one.
Yeah, yeah.
I think
What's that?
is that
That's the third one.
that's the third one.
Yeah.
Or no, that's the second one. That's the second one.
Let's
The
can't
third
even
one.
Farewell to the Flesh and jeez.
I'm gonna cheat and look behind me.
Something about bees.
No. I can't think of it right now.
That's right. But we I think that kind of brings us to a close on this bad boy, huh? Halloween season in general, which is kind of sad.
Yeah. Yeah. So this closes our episode of mental health representations in current horror movies.
Or modern.
Modern.
A word that we had to part ways with a while back.
Modern horror villains.
Nice
How's
to
that?
say it, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, Halloween this Thursday. Make sure you guys check your candy before you eat it.
Yep.
People do that still. I don't know.
Absolutely. Can never be too safe.
Yeah.
Another urban legend.
Make sure there's no razor blades in there.
Just no apples. Don't do apples. Weird.
I'm just like going to be standing at my door giving out pocket candy the whole time.
Loose mints.
Loose mints right out
My
of my
dad
pocket.
does that. He'll probably, you come over on Christmas Eve, my dad will give you a loose mint.
Here's a mint and some lint.
Yeah. Yeah.
Nah, but in all honesty, I will be passing out candy to hundreds of kids.
Yeah, it's the
and
best.
It is a wonderful, wonderful time. I will be dressed as Michael Myers,
Of course you will.
scaring those kids. Kids aren't scared these days, though. They come up
No,
to me and
it's
they
hard.
They take pictures.
It's hard to scare them.
Really is. So, anyways, that will conclude our October episodes, and we'll be back to some regular scheduled episodes following that. In the meantime, please rate and review wherever you can, specifically Apple Podcasts, because you can write a nice little blurb and tell us what you think. And that would be so amazing to hear your wonderful words.
And no one wanted a ghost story? Personal ghost story?
Wow, no one took you up on that ghost story.
I know.
I forgot about
hurts.
that, actually.
That hurts a little bit.
Oh.
But I can see where I stand. I'm just checking right now to make sure.
Yeah, no, Greg, no one did.
Okay. Unbelievable.
Well, are you going to keep that offer for another week?
Oh
or-
yeah. The offer's on the table.
All right. What do they got to do again? Just write a review and then
Yeah.
send us a message to let us know. And then you're
That's
going to
it.
send them a personal ghost story with their name included in the story
right.
as well as a character.
They can play it on Halloween night for their friends at their party.
Oh boy, man, this is getting better and better. All
Come
right.
on, get on it.
You heard it. And then another thing to know is also, follow us on social medias. We're on all of them. You can reach out to us on any of the social medias, specifically like Instagram or email, utgnpodcast@gmail.com. So, yeah, do that. But yeah, we'll see you guys later. Have a great evening. Happy Halloween.
Happy
Enjoy
Halloween.
yourself. Be safe. Don't do anything that I wouldn't do, which is a really short list. So,
Yeah.
you're good.
You're probably
fun.
fine. Yeah.
All right, everybody. Have a good night. Ow!
All right, buddy.
You didn't howl.
Ow.
There you go. Yeah. All right. Peace.